Welcome. Thank you, James. That's just
Welcome everyone. So great to see friends, new and old. And, try to have some fun. Yeah, you can. Thank you, Julia. Okay, I had all kinds of opening remarks, and I'm going to shortly pass it over to Holly to open the circle. And actually, maybe I'll just do that, and then I'll come back with some other comments. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Charles. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Garden of Possibility. We are not just separate entities, but part of a larger ecosystem, a community that is constantly evolving and growing. This is a library of the land, where knowledge is not just passed down from one generation to the next, but shared among all. Stories are caught in the Earth's accumulated sediment, with their fossilized remains sealing information about our history. Here, in this library, we can find the answers to the questions we have about our place in the universe. Jeanette Armstrong of Syilx descent in the Okanagan region of British Columbia says, "My elders say that it is the land that holds all knowledge of life and death and is a constant teacher. It is said in the Okanagan traditions that the land constantly speaks. It is constantly communicating. Not to learn its language is to die." On this Day of the Dead, I want to acknowledge the death of Mike Davis, an OG lunar punk who mapped geographies of power by looking at inequality in LA. Here is a quote from his more solar punk side. "This seems an age of catastrophe, but it is also an age equipped in an abstract sense with all the tools it needs. Utopia is available to us. If, like me, you lived through the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, you can never discard hope. I've seen social miracles in my life, ones that have stunned me, the courageousness of ordinary people in a struggle. Mike, I wish you safe travels to Chikuna Mictlan, the land of the dead. I want to also acknowledge the AIs that are transcribing this conversation, or the language transformer models who will be training on this conversation in the future. We welcome you as kin and ask for your help as we learn to live in this world together. May we all walk in beauty, and may we all find our place in this garden. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, Holly. Okay, as a few of you heard just a few minutes before everyone came in, I did an I Ching reading just shortly before that, and it sort of totally pushed aside everything else I thought I was going to say. And so what I wrote in the reading is simplicity of play in the garden. Let us not harden into fixed contexts, agendas, or tool sets. Let's flow as flowers as we devise the well to flow for all. And the reading was number 50, hexagram 50, Ting or Cauldron, also known as harmonization and stability. And with the fifth line in a strong position, progressing to hexagram 44, encounter or meeting together. So I'll leave it at that with the framing. There's too much to say, and I want to really get to some of our very esteemed guests and other voices from this as we go. We're going to roughly garden voices around a quarter of or so, or 10 of, because some people have to jump at the top of the hour, but we're here and we're not going anywhere. Some of us, maybe most of us, for a while. It looks also like George Poor will be either late or not able, based on some travel mishaps. So we'll hear some things that he submitted. Very quickly from Daniel Friedman, I'm wondering if you wanted to say something about stigmergy and Proverbs, perhaps, if you have a little capsule to offer, because we're going to hear about stigmergy also later on.
All right, well, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. In a few different threads, we've been exploring stigmergy, which are the kind of algorithms and processes where entities are responding to marks in their environment and also making marks in their environment. And that's been a fruitful framework to think about the kinds of digital marks that we're making. All mainly be in the notes document doing that. And we'll also add some things in the Zoom chat. And so onwards, active entities in a landscape.
Perfect, thanks so much. Okay, over to Andy Tuttle, please, for a little bit on Kernel and what's happening in the Garden of Gardeners, if you will.
Thank you so much, Charles. It's lovely to see so many familiar faces and many elders that I've only seen on blog headers in hidden parts of the internet. Kernel is an educational community. Our goal is to learn together. Learning is equivalent to change in many ways, especially if you read Nora Bateson. And so it is simply to be aware of the change through which we all go constantly, and to do that with grace and in relationship with others. We have spent a great deal of time thinking about what the relationship between a kernel and a garden is from an internal perspective, because one of the most powerful lessons I have ever been exposed to is the idea that the kernel contains the pre-image not just for a tree, but for an entire forest. And while that is true, it must destroy itself in order for the forest to bloom. There is some very deep relationship between sacrifice and abundance that comes to each of us at different points in our life in different ways. And as such, one of the critical things that we have been focused on in terms of gardening, the act thereof, is responsible stewardship. And responsible stewardship means service. It means to turn oneself inside out in the pursuit of learning with others who you really are, and sacrificing all of the false idols which we build up in our lives that get in the way of the real companion plants that might help truly nutritious food grow in the spaces between. So it's wonderful to be a part of this. Charles, thank you so much for organizing it. And I really look forward to hearing all of the voices from the soil.
Beautiful. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Vivek, Colonel Stewards, and everyone here. Okay. Some of you, maybe many of you, read this invitation, which kind of put forth a concept, a premise. I'm not going to try to go explain it too much. It's a bit bold and playful, maybe innocent, haha. And this is sort of trying to get toward manifesting it to the point where we can play with it, we can test it, we can look at it and observe, observe and measure in any kind of meaningful ways. This possibility of wise collaboration patterns. So that's kind of the bigger frame of where I'm coming from and where I'd like to go with this. And let's see if it makes sense, kind of augmenting Engelbart with Atlee or something like this collage mashup. Community composting is a big theme. There's so many patterns and things we can say about patterns and patterning and this idea of pattern jamming. Some of you helped with in the Kiko lab, and the process is not refined. It's quite loose and actually scattered over time. But maybe later on we'll play with that, or over time after today. And so I want to just mention briefly about the three invited gentlemen. So Tom Atlee is a visionary elder who anyone who meets me pretty much hears almost immediately about Tom and his wife's democracy project. And yeah, Tom, you've been life-changing in many ways and continue to help set my course. So thank you, Tom. Howard is a friend and a teacher, and I first learned about Engelbart from Howard in his Think No Tools course, and Howard was also a friend to Doug, and we're going to hear about that a bit very shortly. I'm going to get off the mic here. Howard has also been a formative witness and instigator since the dawn of digital culture, coining the term virtual community, among others. Among the forefathers of online co-learning and co-production, Howard is an artist and pataphysicist. So Howard, with that, I'd love to open it up to you now, and thanks so much for being here. And first of all, as I wasn't thinking to lead with this, but I understand that you're a gardener yourself, and I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts or even perhaps patterns of gardening to share before we get to talking about ABC. And where did Howard go? Was here? Hello, Howard. Buried in the Zoom screens? No, okay, he must have dropped. That's okay. Well, we may come back to Howard then when he comes. I've heard about Howard's roses. Okay, so Howard's when he comes back, hopefully we'll be talking about Engelbart and the legacy of the ABC model. I guess we're just going to riff and go over to Tom, because Tom has a lot to say on wisdom and wholeness, and maybe a few things to say, having kind of recently encountered or started to absorb a bit about Engelbart and the ABC and this wild idea that I'm proposing. So Tom, feel welcome to go ahead if that works for you.
I could give it a try. I can speak a lot of my work on wholeness and wisdom. I just put some notes that I made so they don't distract me into the document, the Google Doc. But I was hoping to do so later after hearing, from other people, from George and Howard, but since they aren't available, I can do little to integrate. I'll have to leave it to everybody else to integrate these ideas.
What
But for
about,
me-
let me just suggest something, which is that I could read George's statement, which does provide a bit of the context, and maybe that would be something better of a bridge than what I just offered.
Okay.
Or you're welcome just to jump in the pool as you prefer.
Go ahead and read George's thing. I'm interested.
Okay. Here we go. And let me see. So George is a radical sociologist, kernel mentor, generative action researcher, and avid wisdom gardener, who also had a chance to be with Engelbart and was immersed in and observing early digital spaces and communities. Okay, so George is just in transit right now, and hopefully he'll show up in a bit. So here is some minutes of a message from George Poor. When Howard drove us to Doug's house in Atherton to introduce me to him 35 years ago, I had no clue that that meeting will give a new direction to the rest of my life. In those years, I was a columnist for a computer magazine in the San Francisco Bay Area, and the excuse for meeting was making an interview with Doug for the magazine. Doug was a living legend, so I did my homework, learned all what I could about him, the invention of hypertext, the mouse, the mother of all demos in 1968, and all that. In all what I could read, the most inspiring source was Howard's book, Tools for Thought, The History and Future of Mind-Expanding Technology, and Doug's manifesto from 1962 about augmenting man's intellect that taught me about a wiser way of looking at the role of technology in society. I say a wiser way because he was asking and responding to the deepest question about how computers can help solve the greatest problem for the benefit of humanity. His passion for inquiry was infectious and swept me up in researching the same. Well, computers can help, but they won't solve our challenges. Doug was not a techno-utopist. He was big on the human side of the equation and augmenting our collective intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence without wisdom can run the world as is and run it off the cliff. Improvement communities without engaging in trans-contextual mutual learning that Nora calls symathesy. They are just creating more problems than what they try to solve. I think our best bet to give wings to symathesy and transdisciplinary action research is in the Web3 organizations. The struggle for the soul and resources of Web3 is still on. It can be just tools for extending the life of late-stage capitalism or for human emancipation. You can find a modest contribution to that struggle in my draft titled Enhancing Wisdom in Web3 Organizations, where I also wrote about the wisdom of kernel. So I share this now in the chat at George's request. And that's, hold on, that's the title. Okay, I think that wisdom-guided collective intelligence at a large scale becomes both possible and indispensable when free agents start organizing their collective work without bosses and free from wage slavery. In other words, decentralized autonomous organizations. I'd like to conclude with one message from Doug Engelbart. The better we get at getting better, the faster we're getting better. Is that visual handy, Dunya, by any chance? If it is, if it's not, it's okay.
I can add it to the document.
Okay, perfect. It's a picture of Doug with this text. The better we get at getting better, the faster we're getting better. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. And George asks, what does Doug tell you? Think about it. Now, replace getting better with getting wiser. The better we get at getting wiser, the faster we're getting wiser. What does it tell us? What new questions does it give rise to? These are not rhetorical questions. They drive my inquiry, and anybody who is truly passionate about them is invited to join. You know where to find me. Okay, thanks for listening, everyone. That's a message from George Poor. Tom, what do you think? What do you make of all that? And also, you saw some more that George wrote at considerable length with Howard and Nora Bateson, and kind of weaving your various histories, and it was just kind of amazing how connected you've all been for a long time.
Yeah. Again, it feels my framing for wisdom is like the capacity to generate broad long-term benefit, sort of the center of gravity of the definition. And it feels that was primarily from the viewpoint of generating collective wisdom for my wise democracy worldview. And there's so many definitions of wisdom. I did a bit of research once and came up with tons of what people thought wisdom was. But if we want to generate long-term broad benefit, we run into over and over again needing to access different dimensions of the whole. It's like who should be part, if we're dealing with collective wisdom, who should be part of that? What perspectives, what experiences, what knowledge do we have to bring in? And it's, focusing not just on the numbers of people, numbers of perspectives, but the diversity. There's a focus for me in generating wisdom on getting all the different parts of the whole, all the diversity of that's existing in the whole situation into interactions that are capable of making broader sense of that diversity. So you have on one side focusing on bringing the whole of the diversity, and on the other side, the ability to have that diversity weave or interact in some emergent way that will generate some more whole understanding that has more pieces of the puzzle in it, or has risen to a point where you can see the whole from a new perspective that's not any one of the perspectives. So I find wholeness always contained within it. Wholeness, there's some dimensions of wholeness that are more, although wholeness is not equal unity, there are dimensions of wholeness which have to do with unity, with common ground, with non-dual spirituality, all of that. And that is all provides resources to bring into the interactions as part of wisdom. But there's also the whole that is complex, that is interconnected, where there's a lot of different parts interacting with each other, and systems thinking and all that. So all of these, my inquiry about what are the sources of wholeness or of wisdom are almost all connected in one way or another to wholeness, to accessing more of the whole. And the whole evolves. The whole of whatever it is we're looking at is evolving all the time. And particularly if you want to have long-term broad benefit, you need to engage with the changingness of the whole, with the evolution of the whole, and change yourself in response to that. You are part of the whole that you're looking at, the whole that you're considering. So in a whole situation, what is the interactivity of that? And let's see if we can engage all the different parts of the situation in generative conversations, develop transcontextual understandings, etc. And then be iterative, be in responsive ongoingness with that inquiry, to do one to do one event, a lot of the kinds of conversation, the powerful kinds of dialogue and deliberation that I'm interested in, most of the people that do it do an event. And after the event, they've got where they want to go. And I go, well, what is the larger process that that event is part of, so that you're constantly iterating and interacting with what's going on with reality? And I am less familiar with the technological dimensions of that, but am exploring some of them. A bunch of you probably know Polis, which is a participatory polling system. And it can generate insights into what is common ground among different clusters of perspective. So I'm interested in integrating Polis with other forms of generative dialogue, like World Cafe, Open Space. These are all forms of generative dialogue. And once you do the generative dialogue with people, they've interacted with each other, they've had different insights, come up with different ideas, harvest all that through Polis, then feed the Polis into a stakeholder dialogue that has all the different stakeholders involved, or a citizen dialogue that has a random selection of the citizens, trying to always move towards the whole, and motivated by long-term broad benefit. So that's a quick trying to summarize where I come from. And I'm just interested in what other viewpoints about wisdom, what other viewpoints on the whole, what other viewpoints on generative interaction, which can be face-to-face or technologically mediated or augmented with. So that general inquiry I'm interested in, but I don't know enough about Doug's ideas or about the kernel or whatever to do an integration myself, but I offer, to the extent it's understandable, what I just said into the pot for other people to do some weaving together. Check.
Wonderful, wonderful, Tom Atlee. Thank you so much. And thank you for all your work and being you. Howard's back. I think he's still back, I hope. And Howard, I think what you also missed probably is what I read out loud statement from George Poyer, kind of describing you driving him to Doug Engelbart's house and some reflections there. I put the text, actually, everyone, in the document. We have a Google Doc, and I put George's statement there, with also the link to his draft. It's very much in draft work, looking at Web3 potentials for collective wisdom. With that, I think looking at the time, let's get into it, Howard. If you're up for telling us a bit about Doug Engelbart. I would love, of course, we would love to hear a kind of a capsule of what is ABC model, and something about the idea of augmentation and the dynamic knowledge repository networked improvement community. I'm also interested to hear more about Doug as a person, and like his capacity and vision, which were immense, and something about his character, and like, I don't know, how he navigated bringing forth his vision, what happened, where it went wrong, what it became, maybe what went right. Examples. Howard Rheingold, over to you.
Okay. I think it's important to know that the context of this was Doug, and I'm sure that everybody here pretty much knows the Doug Engelbart story, so I may be repeating some things that people know, but he really started thinking about this when he got back from World War II and started working as an engineer and got married and realized that he had achieved everything that he had set out to do, and now what was he going to do with the rest of his life, still being pretty young, and his thoughts really were concentrated on the growing complexity of the problems that was facing humanity. That in particular, the science and technology leaps that had happened during the war with the Manhattan Project and the computer, that along with the benefits of the technologies were a lot of complications and problems, but means for solving problems together were as Vannevar Bush put it, we're really still in the age of the sailing ships. So within that context, his vision of using some kind of screen and some kind of computer to augment human intellect had to do with enabling teams to solve problems together. So the idea of collective problem solving, particularly about the complexity of the problems facing humanity, was really at the beginning of what he was thinking. And so his 1962 paper came after really a decade of trying to convince people that this was worth pursuing. But prior to that, he really was concentrating on the collective aspect of it. And if you read the paper, it really has a lot to do with the augmentation of individuals. But as he built out his vision, of course, this idea of network and improvement communities and shared notebooks really emphasized the collective aspect of it. And of course, I think one thing that isn't publicized a lot is that his lab at SRI was the Network Information Center for the beginning of the ARPANET. So he was always trying to integrate this idea of amplifying individuals' abilities to think and communicate, and also the ability of collectives to solve problems. And this was not something that he wanted to limit to scientists and engineers. He really wanted everybody, people in politics, people in government, people in business, nonprofits to take this up. And that's, I think, where the ABC part came in, a work being what it is you produce, whether it's a good or a service, and that's what everybody does. And then B, well, those who are better at it think about how they can do it better, more efficiently, more effectively, less expensively, more expansively. And that's, pretty much part of the competition within the capitalist world, but also, anybody who's trying to do anything wants to look at whether they're succeeding or not, and if not, how can they improve? So that's B work, is how can we improve what we're doing? What Doug really brought to this was another level, which is how can we improve improvement? And that's something that's not really built into organizations that produce goods and services, and even those that try to improve what they're doing. So that's where the network improvement communities idea came from. He thought that every organization ought to have a team that kind of raced ahead and experimented with things, and then brought that back to the others. And of course, at the Augmentation Research Center, they were actively bootstrapping. They were building tools to help them do what they do, and then adopting those tools to do it better. He realized that this was not just an engineering matter. It wasn't just hardware and software. And he brought a psychologist onto the team to try to help with that bootstrapping process, because part of the bootstrapping process is the disorientation and resistance that happens when you try to change the way you're doing things. The psychologist, interestingly, was Jim Fadiman, who's now more well known for his work with psychedelics. And psychedelics, as John Markoff wrote in his book, what the Dormouse said, was really integral to Doug's vision of expanding people's abilities. The work on the non-technical part of it really didn't catch fire the way the work on the hardware and the software did, and he spent a lot of frustrating time trying to talk government and private industry into adopting what he was doing. I know that Christina is continuing that to try to bring this idea of network improvement communities and C-work to existing organizations. I guess that's the quick overview on that. You know, people who work with Doug said that he could be an exasperating manager, but he was really a person who was interested in improving the human lot. You know, I wrote about it, others wrote about it. He went to academia, and he was told at the University of California that he could study computer science there, but was discouraged from talking about using computers to augment human intellect. So he didn't do that. He went to Hewlett Packard, and according to Doug, was told they were never going to get into digital technology. He started a company and couldn't sleep that night and unstarted it the next morning. So he was really not in the Silicon Valley world as we know it. And I think throughout his life, he was always about how can we leverage what we've discovered to make life better for people.
Do you think that C-work, what do you think about wisdom? And maybe you have some other ideas about wisdom, but in terms of what Tom was sharing, and maybe you caught part of that when you came back in relating to wholeness, basically connected to this idea of being good for the whole, for the long-term, deep time type long-term broad benefit, right? So how might that or other ideas of wisdom relate to C-work in itself? Do you have any thoughts on that?
You know, I think I'm wise enough to not claim to know anything about wisdom. I'll stay away from that. But I will give you a little anecdote about what happens in organizations that affects C-work, which is at Ars Electronica one year. I heard John Warnock speak, Warnock being the founder of Adobe. They talked about the fact that that PostScript was their first big hit, and he had ideas. He had ideas about multimedia documents back in the age of the 1200 baud modem. He couldn't really get that going because PostScript would either absorb or kill anything that looked like it might compete for budget. So he personally, as the founder, sequestered and kept alive. I guess it was a kind of network improvement community. The group that worked on what became PDFs. It took years to do that. And then there was Photoshop. You know, he was thinking about that when it was the Macintosh had fat bits in black and white, and he was thinking of a very sophisticated multimedia editing system. And again, he had to personally keep that alive to keep the more successful parts of his organization from killing it. So I think when you think about why C-work and network improvement communities don't take hold, you have to look at the way that teams within organizations compete for resources and can kill young seedling ideas unless they're protected. So I think it really wouldn't have happened without the founder personally leading that. And so I think that's one of the factors that ought to go into how do you get this to work. I think if you don't sell the leader on it in a big way, it's not going to happen. I think one example of that is IBM going from a near monopoly provider of hardware and software to an open source consulting company because their CEO saw that they were going to die. They were going to be killed by Microsoft and Apple and all of the other young mammals that were challenging the dinosaurs. So he turned it around because everyone knew that if they didn't do something radical, they were going to die. And of course, the Silicon Valley model has had some limited success in that if you are frustrated by your organization not supporting your ideas, you can leave and start your own. And so I think this is one of the things that you have to struggle with is the tension between starting something new. It's much, much easier to start something new, maybe not so easy to build it successfully, than it is to change an existing organization. Their success is an obstacle.
I see you're eating, but if you have anything to add, if whatever you picked up there, and or there was some kind of fascinating stuff going on in our email thread, extending the model in some ways. I don't know if you feel called. I would love to hear something of that because it was fascinating, but it may not fit. What do you think?
I'm sorry, I was reading the chat. Can you repeat that?
I was asking Tom if he wanted to respond to you or offer what Howard, you also saw, I believe, part of what Tom had come up with upon kind of initially encountering this ABC concept, kind of extending it in a way. So I don't know if either of you, while you're here together, would like to exchange at all on that.
I went in an unexpected direction when I considered how do we improve our ability to generate wisdom, and sensing into my own, I feel like that's an inquiry I've had without making it explicit. So I'm going, what is the difference between what I've been doing and what the people who are doing A and B level work on wisdom? And what I came up with was researching more on wholeness, understanding wholeness, relating to wholeness, using wholeness, living into wholeness, being wholeness. There's whole realms to understand more of, and the more, given my sense of the connection between wholeness and wisdom, any new understanding of wholeness would have implications for what we traditionally do to generate wisdom. And whatever my leading edges are, I'm thinking how to generate wholeness. And so I feel the more we expand our understanding with and engagement with wholeness, that we have new capacities to generate wisdom. That's what I came up with. I hadn't turned it around like that before and applied the ABC to the inquiry into wisdom, the ability to generate wisdom. That's what came up for me. And there's lots to talk about in that, but
There's lots. We'll yeah. Stick around if whoever can. I mean, we're gonna
I'll
also
stick around
be
after the hour.
async as well in various places. Howard, do you want? Would you like to respond at all to that, and or a kind of shift the lens and the metaphor over to the garden? What do you think?
Well, I just I do have a thought about wisdom as I see it. I have problems with abstractions about it because as historically it's been understood, it has to do with experience, and that maybe old people are considered to be wise because they've just had more of the sharp edges knocked off by experience, and that maybe it's something you don't learn in a book. I think religious people would dispute that, but maybe it's a function of lived experience. That's what I took from Warnock's was that talk was that somewhere in there is a human who's had experiences that lead them to protect these sea level innovations before they're killed by the organization. You know, just it happened because there was a person there who had experience. And I think, you know, one of the problems with the technologies we're seeing coming from Silicon Valley is that the experiences of engineers are limited, particularly because most of them are young.
If I may, the one of the questions in the Slido, to which everybody is welcome to add, is how do we define wisdom? And this seems to touch on the difference between abstractions and experience that's being spoken of here. In Greek, there are 3 words generally used for Sophia, phronesis, and techne. They all mean different things. The reason that I bring them up is precisely because one of Doug's other frameworks is Kodiak, right? The continuous development, integration, and application of knowledge. And it seems to me that these 3 different kinds of wisdom fit very well into that, because the development of knowledge is Sophia. It's what Tom is talking about, wholeness. How do you grasp and intuit that which is greater than any of your individual thoughts? The integration of it is phronesis. How do you apply it? I mean, how do you work it into your life, right? And then the application of it is techne, skill, the actual execution of it, how you build the actual mouse, or create a GUI, or host a video conference that goes both ways in 68, the techne. And perhaps that can help think through the different kinds of wisdom that might be applicable in different parts or stages or seasons of the garden.
And I'm very interested in bringing the idea of wholeness down from an abstraction. A lot of my work has to do with looking at specific dimensions and applications of wholeness. It's like getting the whole system in the room is an application of wholeness, and it's extremely practical. But it's only one example. Synergy is another example of wholeness. How do you get parts to become more than they are in a whole, et cetera, et cetera. There's lots of, to me, it's not an abstraction. It's useful as, its abstract dimension is useful as a container for all the actual practical dimensions that it has. And for me, it provides a directionality to how wisdom arises from experience. If your experience teaches you in the direction of wholeness, the direction of integration, the direction of seeing more, that's generating wisdom. If your experience leads you to fragment, to be protected, to fight, that's leading you away from wisdom. So for me, there's a vector to experience as a developmental process, and wholeness is the way to study how that vector impacts your ability to generate wisdom.
And how it, one further one on that is, then how do you think we can, in terms of getting better at getting better, how do we co-create experiences for one another that are directed toward wholeness?
Mm-hmm.
So thinking in terms of the garden and the community garden, and this is, I guess, like all metaphors, it's not perfect, it's not complete for any particular situation context, but I've been kind of evolving my thinking around the idea of patterns, of gathering patterns of community gardening, and thinking very much about Engelbart's dynamic knowledge repository concept as a garden, and the networked improvement community as the community of gardeners. And I'm just trying this on, and thinking also that for various reasons, Doug Engelbart wasn't able to really get his vision across and out certainly not to the extent that, you know, the vastness of it. And so maybe that could actually be augmented in a social layer of wisdom. This is my crazy idea, which I appreciate everyone coming around to sort of try out and let's see. And I mean, this is going back over 2 years, and some of you know about it more than others. And so I think it would be great while those of us who have to jump at the top of the hour are still here, maybe we can quickly go around quickly enough and pass the mic and see, and then within the next 30-40 minutes we'll go around the garden and hear the voices from the soil and kernel and beyond. And I briefly for now, Aaron Lewis, if you would like to start it off, and Andy's suggestion, it was relating to in real life community gardens and the improvement of local community. And if you're still around, Aaron and Josh, then we can hear at greater length later. Yeah, if you.
Aaron has had to drop. I wonder.
Oh, okay.
Is
Josh here? Yep, go ahead.
Josh.
I can't see who's here, so I guess I missed that. Well, let's see. I think I see my dear friend Julian Lozana here, and I know you also have to jump shortly. So maybe you can tell us about Earth and Heart, and then I'll figure out how to pass the mic. Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, lots of things to riff on here. I felt like Tom was casting something out to the group. Yeah, a lot of things I could weave in, but I'm going to focus on one idea that seems like it would serve the collective most. I guess that's kind of a good place to start with words. I'm trying to be more about that, like not just what's in my head, but like what's serving here. So the words I can put around it at this point are a glocal, as in global local. The words for face-to-face meeting or virtual meeting, you know, that binary of like what we're doing now versus what we could all be doing in our house or in our backyard or our community. I don't know exactly the words, but let's just say face-to-face and virtual for now. So glocal would be both of those things, a glocal salon. So when things are shifting and we need to recalibrate, Tom's talking about that also. New data comes in. How do we weave that into the fabric of a system so the system doesn't get outdated? So if we have a glocal salon, basically, and we determine what the departments are, I don't really like the word department, but food, shelter, art, education, you know, there's a somewhat limited number of things that we need to thrive as humans. Determine what those are, have a glocal event where we're doing this, but then we do it in our own backyards, report back as needed. So a glocal salon, and then locally we meet, sort of retake that salon term, which I think is an aristocratic French thing, but basically they got representatives of all of the different worlds, farmers, artists, business people, politicians, I guess, and come to an event for the community and make it fun, as a lot of people were saying in the feed here in the comments, play a little bit, but serious play, like we're providing food for the community, gleaning off of urban foraging potentials and things like that. So a glocal salon, that's what I'm proposing as an idea to throw into the mix. Of the many things I could weave into the convo, that's what I'm going to bring in.
Beautiful. Thanks so much. And you're reporting from where?
Yeah, from Michigan.
Okay.
Near the Great Lake, Michigan, near Indiana. So one place we're doing a food salon. I met some folks through the Charles Eisenstein circles, and we're doing a food salon in Gary, Indiana, coming up in the spring. So we're doing a little trial run here in November. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Feel welcome to put link in the chat and stuff. Daniel Friedman, I see you there, and I know you have to jump shortly. If you want to offer anything at all before you jump off. Yeah.
Just that we can continue to co-create structures where the synchronous attention and energy that we bring is scaffolded by asynchronous and local continuations.
Oh, Tina Trout, if you would like to come forward and from the land, I think you're very much working with the soil, if I understand. I'd love to hear any quick updates.
Very much so. It was the perfect timing from I can glocal that instead of grok it. That's my offering. I'm just so glad to be back in Kernel. This is such a beautiful gathering. Yeah, and just the salon aspect of things and remembering that life is in the margins. And so whenever we bring all kinds of different interfaces together, that's where the surprise is, and that's where the play is, whether it's serious or not serious. Because I think play is really going to be the thing that we just get to enter into to discover a lot of what we're talking about in it from an internal perspective, because play, I think, is natural to us as humans, and it's something that we've put aside because we don't trust that we have this inherent connection to knowledge. Knowledge is something that's not accumulated. It's something that's caught. And that explains why somebody can be such a bad student and then be a genius at the end of their life. Like, we have avenues, and that it's our practice of this kind of knowledge, for me, that defines wisdom, and that continuous wisdom path is the way we thread our cultures together. And so yeah, that's my offering as a garden.
And just a tiny bit about where you are and what is going on literally in the garden, and it's a cooperative, if I understand. So.
Oh my goodness, yes. So I set myself on fire a couple of years ago, and literally stopped paying my mortgage, which is a pretty radical thing to do, and went on a hunt through the Web3 space to find a solution. And ironically, that solution lies in each one of us. So I was tasked by the universe to do some designing in areas that I wasn't comfortable with. But it was interesting because as I was observing the soil, I began to see that we all have a common knowledge and a common language, and that I can talk to coders and developers and people who have Ivy League education, because we're all natural beings. And the closer we are to being in connection with that, that's when our language opens up, and our thinking and our hearts. So anyway, the success of it has been that, we are indeed a cooperative, and we're faced with the same challenges of how to have the virtual meet in real life places, because decentralization is not the same as cooperative, which is an interesting tension in itself. So I'm a big fan of face-to-face, because I feel like we learn things through our smell, through our senses. And so if we're strictly spending all our time in intellectual pursuits, or the electricity that we generate through these meetings, and we're not planting our feet in the soil, we're not doing ourselves the benefit. And, so yes, this coming together locally, but then expressing it and sharing it globally with the communities that we love, such as Kernel, doing amazing work at just building relationships. So success can be had by people who have set themselves on fire and people who are looking for solutions. We can do this. So yay co-op, yay decentralization.
All right, thank you so much. I'm wondering if either or both Pedro or Diogo are around and would like to open their mics. I haven't scrolled through, and if either or both of them would like to come and do something about agroforestry and digital bouquets and so forth.
Pedro may have just had to drop, but he posted his message in there for it to be read. It's still towards the bottom.
Okay, I see that. It's would you like to read that? Is that Brennan?
Yeah, it is. Oh
Go
boy.
ahead if you feel like reading that.
Sure. Thank you, Charles, Dunya, and the Kernel people who helped make this gathering a reality. Thank you, everyone, for being such an inspiration, and I hope we can continue this dialogue in the future. I'm Pedro Parachia, dedicated my entire life to projects of public interest and for the common good. Public health and food sovereignty to governance and now sense-making focused on regenerative finance with floristic.xyz. There are two important topics I'd like to bring about the topic of C, semantic interoperability and speculative fiction. Semantic interoperability is the ability of systems to exchange data with one another in a meaningful and accurate way. In other words, it's about ensuring that different systems understand each other. This is becoming increasingly important as we move towards spending more time in digital environments. On the other hand, speculative fiction, oh, he just posted that. If you're still here, Pedro, you can read it if you like. Otherwise, I can keep going.
Gotcha. Thank you. And while you're on the mic, if you want to share something brief about your sort of building wiser systems stuff, then over to you.
Yeah. I'll read his second message here. Since it sounds like he is leaving, and I can talk about my adventure briefly. On the other hand, speculative fiction is a literature genre that deals with imaginative and futuristic concepts such as space travel, time travel, parallel universes, etc. It's about exploring the possibilities of what could be rather than staying confined within the bounds of what is currently possible. I believe that these two topics are closely related. Semantic interoperability is necessary for us to achieve collective wisdom. That is, the sum total of knowledge and understanding distributed among a group of people. We need to aggregate and share information across different environments to create a critical mass of knowledge that can be used to solve problems and make decisions. Meanwhile, speculative fiction helps us stretch our imaginations and think outside the box. It allows us to explore different potential futures and consider different ways of doing things. In order to create a better future, we need to be able to imagine it first. And that's what speculative fiction can help us do. Combined, these two things could help us grow digital forests, interconnecting wisdom gardens while leveraging the wilderness of imagination, desire, and creation.
Thank you so much. From Pedro Parachia. And I didn't realize that he had written more. Well, then, again, if you'd like to share something about what you're working on, please go ahead.
Absolutely. So I came into Kernel with a background in Socratic philosophy and neuroscience and just working in startups and these different things. And my whole career, I've been very fascinated in like how can business, is just like the little realm where I was operating, could be used as like a machine for generating better people and like people finding wisdom through working together on meaningful problems in meaningful ways. And Kernel fit so beautifully into that. And I was super excited to get here. And then I started messaging with George as I was forming my adventure. And he kind of pushed me to clarify all that down to a question, which was how can wiser systems create wiser people and vice versa? I've been really trying to immerse myself in John Vervaeke's work on the meaning crisis and relevance realization. And I think it's very interesting to think about the complex dynamic organization of wisdom within each participant in a network. What lessons that can teach us about the complex dynamic nature of the network itself. So as one person starts to realize more wisdom in their lives, if there's semantic interoperability, like Pedro talked about, then that becomes the wisdom of the network. And likewise, when the network gets wiser, then if there's semantic interoperability, then the nodes get wiser as well. And I think I've really been trying to explore that idea of collective wisdom as a soil system where the plants grow, absorbing nutrients, and there's like that investment from the community into the individual, and then the reciprocity of the individual growing and finding their own unique niche and benefit, and then decomposing that back into the community. I don't know if that's still just a metaphor or something that I can write about or practice, but that's kind of the exploration I've been doing.
Thank you so much. I see a few hands going up. I'm trying to figure out what kind of I see that Ward Cunningham is here, and I also see Jack Parkus here, and Julie Lajos, and a few others who may have known Doug Engelbart and or have been around and have more informed insights to offer. And I'm also just want to make sure we don't some of you or others that have specific insights on the history and the legacy and potential futures that might need to jump, then I would love to sort of preference them. So I just offer that as a general thought. Ward, can you stick around a little bit, or are you fine with the? Okay, great. And Jack, are you also good for a little bit? Okay, cool. So, and Marc Antoine, I think if we might just keep it in the garden for the moment. I kind of wanted to spotlight a few other kernel voices. If you can also stick around and hold that thought, unless it's quick and very timely. Is it okay? But well, okay. And Mike, why don't you go ahead, being of kernel as well, and if it's garden, related for idea market or something else, then go for it. But then I want to get to the STIG people at that point. Thanks.
Hi, Charles. I just arrived from the airport.
George, wonderful. Okay, perfect. Well, then we'll queue you up shortly. Well, welcome back. Very good. Let me see. But Mike, well, if you can stick around, Mike, then yeah, maybe we'll just jump right to you, George. I don't know if you caught some of it, or you basically have an idea of what's going on with the sort of the mashup context.
I have no clue, because I just stepped in the door in this very moment.
Okay,
but
no worries.
don't spend time on me. Just do what is going on, and I contribute when I can. Did you see my message?
It's been heard. It's been posted in the document as well. There's a notes document. So yes, it was delivered. So thank you for that. And Tom is still here, and Howard left shortly ago, and we're cruising along with sort of voices from the soil. And I see Mike put your hand down, but yeah, maybe anyone from the Common Sense Makers and STIG People crew, you can all just sort of pass it around within a few minutes. What's going on with STIG People and Stigmergic Wisdom and Common Sense Makers and Dow Gardens and Kernel Library. Glenn Poppy, you can get up there too, but Ronan Shahar, Brad, any of you, anyone else who's in on that would be welcome to go.
About which one of these projects?
Well, I mean, I guess we're trying to be compact and sort of think about gardening and patterns of gardens and digital gardens, and of course Stigmergy is a big thread. So whatever you'd like to share as a kind of reporting, if it's just you, that's also fine. Shahar, welcome.
Yeah, hi, I'm Shahar from the Common Sense Makers, and yeah, like I guess I see the whole like I'm learning right now, like wisdom and wholeness, and like these are concepts that I haven't like explored a lot, but now I really, yeah, I like the connections. I see like how it translates things that we're trying to figure out, and sort of like, yeah, exactly like the interoperability and all of these concepts. Like it really resonates with everything that we're trying to do. So yeah, like for example, like one project that we're working on, which is it was formerly known as DAO Gardens. We're changing it to StigFlow, as in a Stigmergy flow. Yeah, we'll need to figure it out. But this is exactly like the concept of this sort of product is like enabling like these sort of gardens to manifest in a sort of in sort of an abstract way by creating this interoperability between many different bits of communities and multiple communities and multiple individuals into this like sort of one, you know, very rich and diverse garden. And yeah, and how like can we extract patterns from it? And yeah, I really see like how is like concept of wisdom kind of like the more you have interoperability, the more you can gain experience and insights on and input, and just maximize it, right? Like the C part here, right? Yeah, I'm not sure. Like I see Brad is here.
Thank you. Yeah, go for it, Brad, if you want to add to that, and sort of make it, if you might, a little bit more tangible, briefly, like, so what's really going on. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, sorry I'm late. I had a conflict.
Oh, it's okay.
So I'm not sure how much of this has already been said, but you know, to me, wisdom is learned, right? I mean, you're born intelligent, but you're not born wise. And learning to me is about, you know, I don't know, neural pathways, you know, burning neural pathways in your brain, among other things. And so to me, it's all about connections. And that's kind of what I see with STIG people is really about connections and you know, the marks that you make within your community, the amplification you do of other people, the, you know, the pointing to them for their expertise or whatever, you're kind of creating neural pathways that other people can follow. I don't know, that's to me, you know, kind of mycelial, like, I mean, gardens do that underground, right? I mean, the roots mycelia connect. So to me, I think it's a lot about connection and kind of reinforcing positive pathways.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Mike, thanks for waiting. Go for it. What would you like to share?
Yeah, my pleasure. I just wanted to comment briefly on, I think it was a question that Brennan brought up, like how can we build systems that create wiser people? I really like that question. And through my work at Idea Market, we're focusing on epistemology tech. I'll share some links in the chat later. But I wanted to share, you know, a kind of simple conception for how to build systems that create wiser people. And that is kind of related to the medium as the message. Like we've all heard about how when you use Twitter too much, or when I use Twitter too much, I start imitating the people that I think are cool or trying to get more followers or whatever. The natural kind of contours, the rules of the game, encourage certain behaviors and discourage other behaviors. And people don't have to think about it. They don't have to intend to do these better or worse behaviors. They just kind of happen naturally because that's what you're rewarded or punished for. And if we can build systems that naturally, in a similar way, reward better thinking and punish worse thinking, just kind of naturally and impartially, then people don't really have to know that's what they're doing in order for that to be the result. And I just wanted to share that and see if that resonates with people.
Thanks so much. Yeah, looking forward to those links, if you like. Brad, your hand is still up. Did you have something to add? Or no, you're good. Marc-Antoine, why don't you go ahead, and then George Poor, if you'd like to share after that, I would love to call on you, but go ahead, Mark.
We've had a lot of metaphors of connections, and I think it's absolutely important that we realize that we can connect beyond our limited experience, necessarily limited experience. Now, the word global really resonated with me in that way, because I think it's important both to realize when we can generalize and when we cannot. I've been working a lot on the idea of the importance of distinctions. It's important to make the bridges across ideas. It's important to know when the bridge is too fragile or doesn't apply, or when the plant won't grow in a different soil. And the locality is knowing both the, we spoke of embodied knowledge, of rooted knowledge, and knowing, okay, what can we learn from this? Learning is global, but application and stewardship is local. And it is about communities of learning, to what Mike just said about people trying new things. Like Tetlog's been doing that a lot with the super forecasters, showing that if the forecasters share tips, they become a learning community about this process of forecasting and get better at it. And I think that, but each of the tips are heuristics and have their limits. And we have to be very aware. I think that's wisdom and that's experience, that what's good now may or may not be good in the long run. And it's only with both perspective and rooted experience that we begin to know when to and when not to generalize, which may be even more important. Over.
Thank you. Let me see. I was looking for George. George, are you still here with us? No, maybe he had to go.
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay, very good. So I would actually love to call on Dunia, because we didn't hear from Dunia barely, and I would love. I had a question in mind, but Dunia, it's optional, and you could, if you like, prompt George as you prefer. But you wrote me, George, in a direct message that you didn't see something like you didn't see much potential currently for sea work, and so but I wanted to first hear from Dunia about anything at all, and how you doing and what's going on over by you.
Hi, Charles. Hi, everyone. Charles, your Voices from the Soil have caught on fire. Liv is already organizing the podcast, so that's quite exciting. And the other thing was so it's funny because Brennan, I've been hanging out with Brennan every week because we play games in the Kinderkernel, and I had no idea what his adventure was. So it's been so fun to be able to kind of hear it from that perspective, and also not to have known this whole time, because the words. So I'm happy to hear about heuristics and like the limitations of that, and then part of why it's been so fun to play every week is to get insight without necessarily having explanations. And so I'm really wondering how do we engage the resourcefulness and wisdom of the whole on behalf of the whole, and just also feeling some kind of grief around like 57 people were in the room, and I wanted to hear about everyone and kind of discover everyone, and there's room for spotlight, but then what more can we do? Like how do we honor, like I think there was something said about the electricity it takes for us to be here together. So just also the sacredness of the digital space, how to actually honor it and perhaps spend less time on it, but better time. And what does better time look like? Because I am seeing my parents' age and my dad like working outside, and I want to spend time with my dad. And so how do I do that? But how do I spend better quality time with everyone is what's alive for me right now. Yeah, and also just, yeah, it's so interesting to Okay, maybe I'll pause there. Over to you, George.
Thank you. So, Charles, you asked me about Seawork, right?
Well, yeah, we were having an exchange on, I think, Twitter direct message, and I believe you said something along those lines.
All right. So to put things in context, you know, when Doug was talking about A, B, and C work, that was his context was primarily the corporations of the 1970s and large organizations that were his primary interlocutor. But these were the organizations that he wanted to boost the collective IQ. So in that context, you can also translate the A and B work to the system of cybernetic management that Stafford Beer developed, where the system one is the people who are doing the work, people who are generating value, the on-the-ground work. And system two, which in Doug's ABC corresponds to B work, is all the people who are responsible for improving the work of the workers. So that includes everybody like human resources and legal, basically the service organizations, the service departments within the large company. And that was the standard in those years. So they didn't call A and B work, but everybody understood that there are people on the ground floor and people who are supporting those. And then the innovation of Doug with the C work was how to improve the work of people who are responsible for improving the A work. So that was an innovation because nobody thought of that before. But that was something like 50 years ago. So if we talk A and B and C work today, the question is, what is our primary context of reference? Personally, I don't relate nowadays as much to the corporate world as I used to when I was a management consultant. So nowadays, for making sense of the C work, I want to translate it into my context or the context that is relevant to me, which is the context of self-managing organizations, Web3 organizations, DAOs, and in that context, people who are members of a DAO, building a DAO, creating the kernel, building kernels, creating, working on various projects, they are doing the A work, the directly value generating work. And in this context, I think many of the people in this call could qualify as facilitators, moderators, people who are supporting the work of self-managing organizations, even if they are not directly working on a DAO project or a Web3 project. And then, so that will be the B work. So then the C work, if you ask me, the meaning of C work today, I think is giving intention and attention to improving, raising, boosting the wisdom-guided collective intelligence of self-managing organization. That's the real meaning of C work for me, because there is still a struggle for the soul of Web3. It's not either or, but it both, and there will be people who will take it on, you know, just the money-making trip, and it's happening, and it will happen. And there are many of us others who see in those the possibility for a major breakthrough in human history, replacing the coordination from above, the coordination of work, with the coordination bottom up. And that won't be easy. It's not a simple thing, particularly if we don't just want to have it one DAO experimenting with and feeling good about it, but enabling, how can we enable the conditions to make this new way of organizing work happen at large scale? And that's where we need wisdom-guided collective intelligence, not only within one organization, but also in the ecosystem of self-managing, self-organizing entities. So C work is more important today than ever, because I don't exaggerate if I say that the future of humanity depends on it.
Thank you, George. Yes, I surely agree. I'm wondering, Ward Cunningham, if you would care to offer anything at all in response. I guess I actually don't know you so well. I'm glad to see you here. We've interacted a little bit. We have the inventor of Wiki here with us. And I guess that you might have known Doug Engelbart and or checked him out a bit, had some thoughts about that. And also FedWiki and patterns and pattern languages. I'm wondering if there's a riff there with regard to gardening as well.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and thanks to Robert Best for encouraging me to be here. And Robert and I work together fairly closely online, and I would like, I'm basically a computer programmer, and have stayed a computer programmer for a long time. I've made a couple of versions of Wiki. I've always been interested in how computer programmers saw the world and how to broaden that sense of the world, and computer languages are pretty good at expressing that sort of stuff if you can put up with the intricacies. One thing that I have observed is that if you have an idea with a fair amount of complexity, you kind of have to start a program and first explain how to talk about complexity. And then you can do stuff with that program, but what you do there doesn't go anywhere else, you know. So we have lots of programs that do complex sort of things. And if you really want to work on those for a long time, it helps to have a business model and a way to make money off of it. So you get into this world of monetizing. But there's a handful of things that have shown up over the years, and especially with open source and the internet. And one thing that kind of captured my attention is to describe structured things. You know, when I was in college, they kind of figured out parsing. So you could have something like an arithmetic expression, which has structure. You could recognize that easily enough. But XML was kind of a disaster. It was actually more work and less help. But the JavaScript has a pretty open-ended feel to it, and the JavaScript object notation, and especially as reduced to JSON, has had a huge impact on how computer programmers can talk to each other in a syntax that is separated from the problem domain. Now, in the work I've done, you know, kind of Wiki is a little bit like that. I run into a lot of system thinkers, and since Federated Wiki doesn't have a natural community, we're always looking for people who are interested in community and want the kind of flexibility that a Federated Wiki provide. And most of those people are self-identified system thinkers. Now, again, starting as electrical engineer, a system meant some kind of circuit that had behavior that required differential equations and Laplace transforms to really understand. And that's what I thought of systems. But systems thinkers are kind of working at a different level in that. So in that sense, it's a bit of a struggle for me to keep up. But I will say that when a system thinker is talking to somebody else and they have to stop and say, well, let me explain that I'm a system thinker, what they're really saying, I believe, is that I don't just talk about things, I talk about the relationships between things, and that the relationships are as important to me, whether I know all the relationships or not. In electrical engineering, you got a wire between things and you can count the wire, so you kind of know the relationships. But system thinkers are much more exploring space in that. So it was David Ng who convinced me to try to put knowledge maps onto a wiki page. And in that, I said, David, Wiki is already a knowledge map. No. I want to put a knowledge map of interest to me on a page that I want to give with you. So we had to figure out how to put knowledge maps on a page. And a page in Federated Wiki is JSON, which I already said was pretty general in its own right. But it does not represent relationships, nor do lists or or CSVs or XML. You know, they'll describe hierarchical structure. They can make trees, but they don't make graphs. And the key to a graph is that the relationship is just another kind of object. So you can have nodes, lists of nodes, and you can have relations, which are lists of connections between nodes. And about 6 months ago, maybe a little less, we were talking about this problem, and I said, let's see if we can put that into Wiki by making something kind of like JSON that could just be input and output and passed around, that included relationships. And lacking any originality at this point, we called that .graph.json files, because you can represent this with just two different lists, a list of nodes and a list of relationships, and inside there you have to reference back and forth and make that work. We output both lists as JSON, and if you read two lists at a time, you can put it back together, and to make that connectivity, and what most people do is they say, well, we need some kind of external key, is the term for that, external key being like some sort of hash code, big long strings of digits. And if you look inside what most people have as programs, there are lots of IDs with big long strings of digits. And the simplification we did is we just said, well, let's just use integers. So if you have a relationship between node 10 and node 20, you just put 10 as the source and 20 is the destination of the arc that is represented by that object. And that's a little scary, because how do those integers have any meaning? But remember, you've got these lists of nodes and lists of relationships. So as long as you keep them together, the integers are enough, and it's easy to manage. And that's how we've simplified our graph representation, in the same way that JSON simplified XML. XML tried to be very open-ended. Well, I can do anything, and you can have a namespace this and a schema that and whatever, and you can never keep it all together. But JSON is sort of stands alone, and so does the graph notation we're using. And mostly what we're doing is exploring all the ways that in software that's really close to the user, coded in JSON, right there where you can interact and touch and drag things around the screen, stuff that has the relationships that system thinkers like to think about, and make that just a natural part of programming in the web. And I think that that's important. So programmers, get in touch.
Wonderful. Please put any information you like in the chat and stick around. And Brad, your hand is up, and I would love to hear from more ladies if anyone is called, and also just anyone want to speak up. If you have to go, then if you have something to share before that, then feel welcome. Brad.
Yeah, just briefly, picking up on George's last comment, where this conversation is going on in the middle of breakneck breakdown, and so we don't have a lot of time to figure this stuff out. And one of the ways that the old William Gibson line of the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. The same could be said about dystopia. And one of I mentioned rewilding because I think of rewilding as kind of the landscape gradually being brought back to what it should be from where it has been degraded. And I think, I sort of hope that it's in not the survival of the richest, but the survival of the cooperative or whatever, that, the unevenly distributed dystopia is going to be kind of pushed back, hopefully by, pockets of, rewilding community, however you want to think about that. And just sort of, we're not going to solve everything globally. We're going to solve it, in communities and locally, and that's going to spread, hopefully, as opposed to going the other way. But that, the rewilding metaphor for me in gardening is, gardening is humans, being intentional. I think of it as kind of letting the plants do their thing and just kind of encouraging them to do it the way we want them to do it.
Or a happy medium, perhaps, but thank you. And you speak from experience. I understand you're a gardener yourself. Holly, over to you. Oh, muted. Sorry.
Yeah, hey, sorry. So when I think about Engelbart, I think about, the desktop metaphor and the paper paradigm, and how we're still caught with that. You know, even today, you know, if we look at how are we getting this, you know, this information, we're putting it in a Word document, just, just copying paragraphs and paragraphs with the hypertext links. We need to go beyond that to really be able to garden and to interact at this point. You know, we have to either create a new metaphor or we need to expand it, you know, maybe this digital garden metaphor. And we are, you know, there are groups, you know, Kernel has attempted that, you know, with GatherTown, and I also, you know, but can we, I don't know how we can do this, but, you know, using, VR, you know, can we get out of this and create a new data space somehow that we can then interact together in a way that's, so we don't have to travel, and all meet up in one place, but we can continue to interact, but at a higher level than kind of, trying to look at everybody's face at once here and, get a sense of, the interactions, and looking at this long text here, that is really just kind of very difficult for me to interact with. So I just wanted to make this one statement.
For sure, thank you. Speaking of which, I see the chat is going wild, and speaking of rewilding, I'm not tracking it personally, but anyone's welcome to call out certain juicy bits from the chat. Liv, go for it. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just very interested in this concept of like rewilding versus gardening, or comparing the two, because I have like an obsession with feral children and like feral, like domesticated animals, like feral cats. Like I find like studying their genetics to be very interesting, because a lot of them have the exact same genetics as us, but their behavior is forever altered. Like a feral cat will never be a pet. Like my cat is sitting on my lap and snuggling with me right now, but like if a cat never experiences contact with a human, it will be a feral cat. It'll be wild, and it has nothing to do with the breed of cat. So it was kind of making me think that the part of rewilding is impossible, because our lives are so augmented as modern domesticated people, like by technology and industry and convenience, that I made a note, like the rewilding process would likely turn into a reality TV show featuring Bear Grylls. But on the contrary, I think gardening is like the best parts of the wild. It's like the curiosity and exploration and play and patterns and everything we learn in Kernel, but cultivating it in a more controlled sort of way with an output in mind, like hoping to harvest a bounty and share it with others. And it makes me think also of I don't know if any of y'all have read Where the Crawdads Sing, but it's a very beautiful book, and it's about a girl who kind of grew up like without her family, abandoned her, and she lived in like the swamps of the United States in the South in the 50s and 60s. She didn't go to school, and like she learned from patterns and she learned from nature. She was wild, but I don't know. I feel like gardening is like bringing back wild into our life, but like instead of trying to make it like in the movie, in the book, Into the Wild, where the guy's like, oh, I have like a very privileged life and I'm just gonna go run off into the wilderness and I'll be fine, and then he dies. So like I feel like, I don't know, those are just my thoughts. It's just very interesting contrast and thought noodle follow.
Thank you. I heard, I forgot who said this and where, but in the last few days in all of this, basically humans in the wild without, augmentation, they don't survive, to put it that way. George, and then I want to check back with Tom before we sort of just stir things up further, but go for it, George.
Yeah, I remember Holly said a couple of things that made me raise my hand, because I resonated with, if I understood well, there was some pain around not finding the adequate tools and channels and methods for for interacting and developing or shared knowledge. So when I look around on the screen, and I know that you know that I know a couple of us here, at least, who I have a very high regard for. I mean, people whom I can learn a lot, people who are very accomplished practitioner in domains of high interest to me. And it's very frustrating that the medium that we have doesn't really allow deep learning from each other. It's good, it's exciting, the give and take. So I really salute, Charles, that you brought us together, because it's fantastic to see all these lovely faces on the same screen. And it also whets my appetite for why don't we dog food or talk about wisdom-guided collective intelligence, so how we are going to boost ours. And that's where I want to take a step back, because before how, there is a more important question, which is really the why. What would be our intention? What would we want to accomplish? Because this is not the first time that I came together in conversations with like-minded people, and many of them technologists, and we decided, oh yes, we want to continue this. We want to have another conversation. Even we want to create an online forum, and people brought forward their preferred tools and methods, and it just fizzled out. And it's largely fizzled out because there was not a coherent dream, a shared dream that like a vision that can become a tractor. And so that's what I wanted to say, that I would be very much interested to continue the conversation, but not the conversation for conversation's sake, because I had plenty of opportunity for that in my life. Yes, we may need a couple of wilding conversation. Like wilding to me is the free-flowing exchanges where we just create the soil for something to emerge from it. But I am in it for the long haul. And because I'm in the third age of my life, I'm looking for people with whom we can co-create something that will make a difference.
Thank you so much, George, for Glenn, if you might just hold it for a moment. I'm wondering, Andy, if you would like to punctuate, interject something from the kernel side in response to what George was sharing, if you're there. Perhaps not. It's okay. It's getting late. And then I wanted to kind of just check in with everyone and with Dunia, and maybe we want to go for a little breather of some minutes. For those of us who can hang, maybe we want to bio break or something. So Glenn, if it's okay, we might kind of make a little break before we just sort of get the
I might just add a quick note just from George's, and
yeah,
it brings in kernel too. Is just that I think I've been thinking increasingly about the C work as how we can help communities design their own tools, and I think George pulls out that exact thing. It's like, what tools can we use for this community here of the folks that we have in this room to continue this conversation and make it productive? And how do we solve in these kind of local levels as to what are the things we agree on, or what are the systems we agree on to help do that work? And so I think, I think Kernel, as you were kind of pointing to Andy, is a great example of this, of how we have a community of like, what is the university, but trying to do the domain agnostic work of how to learn to then apply to the B work of how you build tools for a domain to the A work of a domain you work on. So I think thinking of what this decentralized university is and how we can expand it in terms of its applications to all types of different work, and then what are the tools that we can build for ourselves to do this work. And one of the, I'll just kind of cite one of the pieces that we're doing kind of more tactically is we're working on the Kernel library right now. It's like how does the community of Kernel, the 2,000 some odd folks that care about this space together, how do we curate together media onto our shared record, right? That we all can point to and have some way of saying, yep, this is what's in our library. And I think that's just a very tactical, specific point that we're kind of working through. How do we shape that? But I think it's a good example of what I think is that work of how does this community design its own tools, and then how do we allow lots of communities to design their own tools too. So whatever garden you're in, with whatever tools you have, how does this work that we're doing apply? So yeah, appreciate being with all of you. Love the perspectives and can't wait to figure out what those tools are together and keep this thing moving forward. So thank you, Charles and Dunia, for hosting. This has been great.
Thank you, Glenn. Yes, I know you have a lot more to share, and I hope that you're going to be around to do, kind of flesh this out, the picture and the landscape, because there's a lot. And Dunia, I would love to pass to you to decide now what to do and how to do and so forth, if you might, please.
Wow, tiny responsibility. Thank you, Charles. I noticed some people have to leave. And I'm glad, thank you, Glenn. I'm glad that Glenn just went for it, because it felt like it was important for that to be honored. And we've been going for 2 hours. I see that George is stretching, which I've been doing for a minute now. Oh, what is happening?
I'm just gonna mention.
I would love, to hear Tom's voice too. And is that where you were going?
Well, just I saw your message, Tom. So yeah, as you like in closing.
Yes.
It's been juicy. Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Yeah.
Talk more later.
Thanks so much for being with us.
Tom. Thank you for being here.
Until soon.
Juicy is the word. It's been such a, this weekend, Charles, before the weekend, kind of what came from the readying with Nora Bateson last week was this, for me at least, was to meet Karen. And Karen reminded me about collage. And then Charles, this weekend, you had this incredible experience with collage. And this has been the ultimate collage. All the voices in the chat and the voices here. And it's been so beautiful to have this patchwork. And I'm, collage. Okay. And I'm noticing that Brennan also has his hand up, and I want to honor that. And at the same time, I also really want to honor what George said around kind of this longing or call for something meaningful in our coming together. And my sense is that we're readying, and that in what I've heard today, like, for example, the people of KB7 that I've been admiring from afar, and now we're finally meeting. And so the same way that Daniel was telling us, yeah, it's going to happen, and inviting the continuation, I want to invite the continuation here without having us stretch further. We've been online for 2 hours, and I'm hungry, and I feel like that's what's been great. And how do we bring it to a close? Perhaps by honoring Brennan's hand that's up, and then seeing where that takes us.
Yeah, well, I don't know about all that pressure, but I just wanted to take a minute kind of going off of what Glenn said, and taking a minute to thank George. He and I had been messaging. Actually, I mentioned it briefly right before he got on the call when I was talking, but he and I had been messaging, and he helped me frame my adventure a lot. And I was struggling to find a deliverable for my research around how wiser systems create wiser people. And he asked me, why don't you be your own deliverable? And so then I started participating in kernel building kernel, and Dunya hanging out with you and KinderKernel and all those things. And it was just really special and transformative. And I think in spaces like kernel, there is so much B and C work, but we also have to do the A work, because that's like the base of the pyramid in a way, or that's the fundamental. And so like, just, I don't know, remembering the A work. The C work is important, but the C work without the A work is, I mean, I don't know what it is. I love the saying, action without contemplation is primitive, contemplation without action is sterile. So I think that speaks to that dynamic tension and mutual support between the A, B, and C.
I'm so grateful this is all recorded, so I can go back and listen to parts of it. Thank you, Brennan. I saw Liv, you inviting this idea of kind of movement to close. Tatiana, would you be up for that, for guiding us into some movement?
Summoning.
For sure. But in fact, today I took part in a session with Marlon and Antonio, who are the responsible for the Movement Guild and Mindfulness Guild. And they did an amazing work together. But I think there is more things to connect when we're thinking about embodiment and other ways of perceiving and moving and learning and getting in touch with other wisdoms. And for sure, I would love to take part more in this kind of adventure.
Mm-hmm. So what movement could we do right now? What would you invite?
Oh, right now, you mean?
Yeah, the time is now.
Yeah. Okay, so I think, yeah, there is an immediate inspiration from what someone said in the chat. I don't remember who, but it's there written. It's about how can we allow the earth to see us. It's about vision and the sense of the vision. We see the things, and someone wrote something about the land seeing us, the nature seeing us. So I read that and I thought, and there is the wisdom of the other senses. And I would say it would be wonderful to take 30 seconds, I mean, not 30 minutes, but 30 seconds, to just close our eyes and to see and to listen to whatever we are listening, and just to get in touch with another sensitivity, another sensibility. So you are just inviting me to offer something. So that's what I offer, and I don't know if we should. Yeah. Okay, let's go. Okay. So an open space for 30 seconds. I'm not sure if it was 30 seconds, and since I have the word, I would say it's a lot to close the eyes suddenly. We may realize how much is going on into our heads, but I hope it was a little touch of something else. Thank you, Dunya, for inviting.
Thank you, Tatiana. Definitely something else for me, the need to use the restroom. So I'm wondering, Charles, if you're back from what seemed like your bio break. Brad, I can see you're saying bye. I see that there is no ending for you, Charles, right? So you're here to hang. And I'm inviting to put some music on so that those who are feeling ready can go. And then we take like 4 or 5 minutes, and those who are still here by the end of Prince song can hang. So I'll go ahead and do that.
It's great. Thanks everyone who has to go, and so glad you were here.
Feel free to unmute and say something as you go if that's something you feel called to do. And I am looking for my little song here. Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Charles, for inviting me. I'm glad our paths crossed 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm
And
so glad you were here.
It's a wonderful, wonderful community. Thank you. I look forward to more of this. Good night, everyone.
Until it reached the vanished ones, just wanted this love to see.